Hello and welcome to the State of the Fleet Industry, a weekly video series produced by Automotive Fleet magazine. I'm Mike Antich, editor of Automotive Fleet, and today I'd like to examine what's occurring in the fleet industry for the week of September 7th, 2020. So today I'd like to start our conversation by examining two important economic reports that have been released recently. And both of these have a direct bearing on the state of the fleet industry because they provide directional insight on what we might expect as we go into the third quarter of 2020 and fourth quarter 2020. And the first report was the new jobs creation report for the month of August 2020 that was issued just last Friday by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And has been the case for the past four monthly job reports, the number of jobs created for the month of August exceeded expectations and exceeded all economists' forecasts for what those numbers should be. In fact, the month of August 2020 was the third best new jobs creation period in the history of the U.S. economy. Not only were there 1.4 million new jobs created, there was also a dramatic drop in unemployment, representing the second largest decline on record. The other report that I'd like to discuss deals with the August 2020 Purchasing Manager Index that's produced by the Institute of Supply Management. In its background, the Purchasing Manager Index, or PMI as it's known, is based on a monthly survey to senior executives at more than 400 companies in 19 different industries that have been selected because they're representative of the larger U.S. economy. And the key finding for the August PMI report is that it reinforces that for the past 4 months there has been an ongoing expansion of the overall economy. So the million-dollar question is whether this good economic news is being reflected in today's commercial fleet sales volume. And the answer, unfortunately, is no. When you compare commercial fleet sales for August 2020 against same time last year, August 2019, combined commercial fleet sales are cumulatively down almost 17%. And this is on top of a month prior 6% decline in commercial fleet orders for the month of July 2020. So why is there this disconnect? It's a question I ask myself. Why this disconnect between good economic news and actual fleet sales? Now, since April of this year, Automotive Fleet has conducted 3 buying intention surveys. And the results for each survey has been remarkably consistent. About half of the commercial fleets out there indicate that there's going to be no change in their replacement patterns on vehicles. And a smaller subset of that, about 5%, indicate that they'll actually be ordering more vehicles in the 2021 model year. But there is a sizable chunk, about a quarter of the respondents, about 26% of all commercial fleets in these multiple buying intention surveys have indicated that they'll be buying fewer vehicles in the 2021 model year, primarily due to budget cuts or as a result of the dynamics within their specific industry segment. So when looking at the sales for August 2020, this decline has to be reflective of these companies that have indicated to us that they're going to be purchasing fewer vehicles. And especially when you're comparing today's order volume against 2019, which was a pretty strong year for fleet orders. So there isn't any one definitive answer as to why commercial fleet sales are down. We're in a complex industry, a diversified industry. So there's a number of different reasons why this is occurring besides the budget cuts that we've mentioned. So I talked to a wide number of fleet managers out there, and there are a lot of additional theories that are added to this. So let's examine some of these additional theories. One of the common reasons given can be summarized in a single word, and that's rightsizing. And I'm hearing more and more from commercial fleet managers, especially those that are managing sales fleets, that they're now spending time analyzing what is the appropriate number of vehicles that they need for their sales force. And this is in the wake of this widespread adoption of the relatively new virtual meeting technologies, as exemplified by Zoom or Microsoft Teams, that is now causing managers to deliberate internally as to what is the new appropriate number of vehicles that they need to operate their sales fleet. And a lot of this is being centered on the fact that there's still a lot of uncertainty as to how receptive customers are going to be in having salespeople call on them. In fact, most of the customers now are continuing to work out of their home, and based on other conversations that I've had, it seems like most of the companies out there probably won't even be considering coming back to work until we go into the 2021 calendar year, perhaps as late as spring. So the question is, among fleet managers and their management, is whether these road warriors of yesteryear are going to become the Zoom warriors of the future. And also, as a result of the shutdown that we had from mid-March until mid-May, most sales vehicles have dramatic declines in mileage as to where they should be at this point in their service life. And this is allowing their service lives to be extended without negatively impacting resale values. And as a result of this, many companies now are rethinking how they're going to be interacting with customers and prospective customers in the future, and what impact that might have on order volumes for replacement company-provided sales vehicles. They're looking at a variety of different options, as I mentioned in one of my earlier weekly reports. Another one area that's coming up more and more is the idea of taking some drivers or salespeople that are operating in the lower mileage thresholds and offering to them a driver reimbursement option as an alternative to being assigned a company-provided vehicle. You know, another theory that's being presented, and it's probably more than a theory, is we know most companies out there are in a cash conservation mode, and there continues to be ongoing uncertainty as to the business environment as we go into the third and fourth quarter. So this is causing some fleets to be hesitant in placing orders and are taking a wait-and-see attitude and actually deferring orders for 2021 models until later in the model year. Because of this less than certain business outlook, that's likewise contributing to this downward pressure on fleet budgets. And from what we hear in talking with fleet managers and from our industry surveys is that the majority of the fleets out there are going to be coping with budget cuts, and these are going to be averaging in the area of that 10% or more range. In fact, only 36% of commercial fleets that have been surveyed state confidently that their budgets will not be cut. So that's only 1/3 of the fleet managers out there are confident that their budgets are going to remain as is. But the bigger issue comes back to when will employees or your customers be returning to their jobs that's going to allow direct face-to-face sales meetings that involve driving from point A to point B in a company vehicle. And everybody's made the transition over to virtual communication, virtual sales calls, and there's actually some salespeople that like the virtual environment much better because they believe, based on their experience, that they're getting better access to senior managers, to the key decision makers virtually than they would in a face-to-face environment, because in a face-to-face environment there are a lot of gatekeepers that you have to go through in order to meet those key decision makers. So everyone has been surprised at how easily we've made this transition from working in an office environment to working remotely and communicating virtually, and the fact that there's been no declines in productivity. But there are concerns that are emerging, and going back to the sales portion, where the concerns are is that there's a limit to how intimate a relationship you can develop with customers or prospective customers in a virtual environment. And it just does not compare to a face-to-face meeting, especially when that face-to-face meeting is in social settings or has a social component to it. So that is the concern, that long-term, could there be a deterioration or even a disconnect with what the true needs are for your prospective customers. So that's going to be played out in the coming months, and we'll be reporting on that. But this concludes my presentation for the state of the industry for the week of September 7th, and I'd like to thank you for listening.